Welcome to week 11 of Bible Studies for Life. We're continuing this week in the story of David and Jonathan. Really focused more on Jonathan this week than David, but we're still in 1 Samuel 18. We're actually kind of going to start before last week's and then skip on ahead to some later passages. Real good story here this week, so I hope you enjoy this. Before we start, be sure and subscribe. If you haven't already, hit the little subscribe button. Tell me you like it. Hit the thumbs up, okay, for that. And then if you have a comment or a question, put that in there, and please share the video with somebody else. Appreciate it if you do that. You want to support the ministry we've got going, you can go right here to give.exposedtochrist.com, and we'll appreciate anything that you give towards that. Okay, we're going to look at 1 Samuel 18. We're starting in 18, 1 through 4, just before what we read last week about David and Saul and kind of their relationship. When David had finished speaking with Saul, Jonathan was bound to David in close friendship and loved him as much as he loved himself. And Saul kept David with him from that day on and did not let him return to his father's house. Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as much as himself. And then Jonathan removed the robe he was wearing, gave it to David along with his military tunic, his sword, his bow, and his belt. Okay, so we've got this scene here where David and Saul are talking, right? And when that finishes, we see Jonathan was bound to David in close friendship. He was the best friend for David. Of course, David is there all the time, and they're seems near the same age, and they become very close friends. Very close friends. He says he loved him as much as he loved himself. This is friendship. Now, just a quick warning here, okay? Some liberal scholars look at this passage and they say, well, this proves that God's okay with homosexuality because David and Jonathan were lovers. That is not the case, and it's a sad thing when people try to look at a passage that says that two men loved one another, and they think, well, if they loved one another, they must be having sex with one another, and that is because I believe that's the only way they can conceive of love, that has to be physical. But what we know is that they were not, that was not the case. They loved each other because friends love one another. No greater love as a man than this, that he will lay down his life for his friends. They love one another, and that was Jonathan and David. They loved one another. They were best friends. And I tell you, we need to get to a place, or let's say back to a place, where you can say that you love someone and it has nothing to do with a physical relationship. In fact, for most of us, the case is that all the people that we love, there's only one that we have a physical relationship with, and that's our spouse, but we love so many other people in our lives, don't we? Our kids, our parents, our close friends, we love them and we care for them and want the best for them. And that was the case between Jonathan and David. So we see here that Saul keeps David with him, doesn't let him go back home. He values David. He knows that he's important, and he gives him a big assignment, as we saw last week, right? And then Jonathan makes a covenant with David because he loved him as much as himself. Twice, right, in this passage, we see this emphasis. Jonathan loved David as much as he loved himself. That is, love your neighbor, right? Love your neighbor as yourself. That's Jonathan is doing this. He's living this out, these passages from the teachings of Jesus. And so much so, he makes a covenant with him. This covenant is, I will do this no matter what. This is my promise to you. I will live this way. It's a covenant. Look what he does. He takes his robe off and he gives it to David along with his military tunic, his sword, his bow, and his belt. Now look, this meant that there was no doubt in Saul's mind that there was a great friendship between his son and David, which in some ways makes the things that Saul did all the worse, doesn't it? Wow, Saul did that. He had to know this was his son's best friend, and yet he was trying to kill David. We see how giving in to the worst instincts leads to such terrible destruction in our own lives. But giving in to our best, being willing to love selflessly, this is what Jonathan and David had, this great relationship, okay? Now, we're skipping to chapter 19. You catch that? So we think about all the things that happened last week where Saul is intent on killing David, and now here we are in chapter 19. Saul ordered his son Jonathan and all his servants to kill David, knowing everything that he had to know, seeing the obvious relationship and love between David and Jonathan, the great friendship that they had. Saul, so far gone, so far given in to demonic oppression in his life, ordered his son Jonathan to kill David. He knew Jonathan. He was testing loyalty, right? Do you love more? Do you love him or do you love your own father? Jonathan had another deal going. Jonathan not only loved David, he loved the Lord. He was going to follow the Lord. And so Jonathan wanted to act in a way that honored his father and his best friend and the Lord, to do all three of those things at once. And Jonathan, in his part, he had to strike a middle ground here where he had to pick, when these two things are in conflict, who am I going to love more? And he chose the Lord over his own father. And this is discipleship. This is following God. When you say, well, if my father tells me to do something that's wrong, that I know is against what the Lord says, well, I'm going to follow the Lord, even though my father said that, and he's testing whether I love him or not, and he'll say, you don't even love me. He's willing to do that. Saul's son liked David very much, so he said, my father, Saul, intends to kill you. He went to David and he said, my dad's trying to kill you. Now, I think David already picked up on this when the spear was thrown at him and stuff, right? Be on your guard in the morning and hide in a secret place and stay there. I'll go out and stand beside my father in the field where you are and talk to him about you. When I see what he says, I'll tell you. So he says, you need to do this. In the morning, you need to be on your guard. Be careful. You hide, right? And I'm going to go out and talk to my dad, right? I'm going to talk to him about you. And then I'll tell you what he says. His devotion to David was strong. His devotion to his father was, he's trying to save his father's life, his legacy, his reputation, his walk with God. He's trying to save it. So he says, no, I'm going to go talk to dad about this. He can't do this. Okay. So Jonathan spoke well of David to his father, Saul. He said to him, the king should not sin against his servant David. He hasn't sinned against you. In fact, his actions have been a great advantage to you. So Jonathan goes to David, and I love this. Look how straightforward Jonathan is. Now, look, if Jonathan was just the prophet, we would say, man, what an amazing statement. This would be a great part of the prophet. Well, it is even more so in some ways from Jonathan because he's the son. And so he says to him, don't sin against David. He hasn't sinned against you. He calls it out, doesn't he? He says, look, you kill him, that's a sin. That is a direct rebellion against God. That is sin. He has not done this to you. You cannot do this to him. You can't sin. That's wrong. It's wrong to do that, right? His actions, in fact, he says, his actions have been a great advantage. He has been helping you. He has been leading your army, killing thousands on your behalf. He's been helping you. He's trying to talk some sense into his father. And it does seem to appease or quiet down Saul's fervency against David for a while. For a while. Now look, we're in 1 Samuel 23. You notice that we've skipped 4 chapters ahead. David was in the wilderness of Ziph and Horesh when he saw that Saul had come out to take his life. There's chapters in between. You can read those. I suggest it, but this is where we are now, right? Then Saul's son Jonathan came to David in Horesh and encouraged him in his faith in God. Now look at, we ought to think more highly of Jonathan, don't you think? Jonathan comes out to David to meet him and encourage him and encourage his faith in God. Hey, everybody needs a friend who will encourage you to be faithful to the Lord. Even when you're doing your best, we need somebody to urge us on even more, right? To be a cheerleader for us that's on our side, wanting us to walk with God. And you've got friends in your life, you've got family in your life, and they need you to be their cheerleader. Somebody that will encourage them on to be faithful to God, trust the Lord, because we all need that at different times in our life. We need somebody. So just commit to saying, I'm going to be that person for other people. And I don't know if they'll need me or not, but I'm going to encourage them when I get the chance. When God opens the door, I'm going to encourage them in their faith in God. And who knows, it might be just what they needed in that moment. He says this, don't be afraid, for my father Saul will never lay a hand on you. You yourself will be king over Israel, and I'll be your second in command. Even my father Saul knows it is true. And then the two of them made a covenant in the Lord's presence. And afterward, David remained in Horesh while Jonathan went home. Okay. He tells him, look, don't be afraid, because Saul's not going to kill you. He says, you are going to be a king over Israel. And then even my father knows it. My father knows it's true. He knows it. He's trying to fight against what God wants, but he knows it's true. And then they made a covenant together. in the Lord's presence. They prayed together. They agreed together. We're going to protect one another. We're going to be friends, covenant friends. There is nothing more valuable than to have somebody who has promised before the Lord, I'm on your side. I'm rooting for you. I want the best for you. I'm going to do my best to help God move in your life and work in your life and for you to follow him. I am on your side. We need people like that, don't we? We need friends like that. We need to be friends like that. It's been said, I said many times at the camp I was at last week when we were encouraging Vermont pastors, how important it is to say, I'm on your side. And to be a friend, sometimes we want somebody to be our friend. The first thing we got to do is be their friend. Be there for them, and they'll be there for you. Hey, thanks for watching. Hope it's helped. God bless you. Thanks for teaching. All you teachers, I'm so blessed by you, and just knowing that you're doing what God's called you to. Thanks for doing that. Subscribe, like, comment, share it with somebody else. See you next time.